What kind of people will you never understand? Story 1. People who take other people's food out of a workplace fridge. Decades of bottled up rage on tap for the person who needs a name on food that isn't theirs to know it's not theirs. It's such a petty way to save a few bucks, and you know damn well you're straight ruining someone else's day, and it's not even a hypothetical someone. Faceless stranger. You damn well know you're screwing a coworker and taking the risk that they won't inevitably booby-trap the food or you get caught and fired. Just grab a sandwich from a store. It's like $5. As someone who is a bit of a germaphobe, that kind of thing freaks me out. I'm not eating food from some untrusted source. I've used enough public restrooms to know a ton of people aren't washing their hands. But I'm gonna trust they made their food hygienically? I don't think so, buddy. Seriously, have food thieves never seen an episode of Hoarders or Extreme Cheapskates? A woman at my old job told everyone moments before the potluck began, if we find any cat hair in the food, just ignore it. No meal is complete without a little Roscoe hair, and giggles. I didn't eat anything at all that day and swore off all of potlucks. I did this. I was a newlywed. This was 25 or so years ago. My then wife suggested I could save us some money by bringing my lunch to work instead of going out every day. The next day, she sends me off to work with a homemade lunch in a plastic Publix grocery bag. I put it in our workplace fridge and started my day. Lunchtime comes and I dutifully, if somewhat unenthusiastically, retrieve my Publix bag and eat my lunch at my desk. When I got home, she asked how I liked the lunch that she had packed. I said I really appreciated her doing that, but maybe it hadn't come up yet that I wasn't a big fan of chicken salad sandwiches. She said, "What are you talking about? I made you a turkey sandwich." Uh-oh. The next morning, I put a sticky note on the fridge door at work, apologizing for my mistake and offering to treat my unintended victim to lunch if he or she would kindly swing by my desk. Phil and I were work buddies from that day on. I always pitied Phil a little bit, knowing he had to power through those awful chicken salad sandwiches. Sorry, Phil. I had a coworker who loved my cooking. I enjoy cooking, and I've traveled to different countries and have taken numerous cooking classes. I would bring homemade pasta for lunch along with delicious homemade Italian cookies. Or I make an elaborate salad with homemade salad dressing or deli-style sandwiches along with homemade soup. This asshat coworker started helping himself to half of my lunch. Had they asked, I would have been happy to make extra, as I love to see people enjoy my cooking. I didn't know who was doing it. I placed notes in my lunch asking the culprit to stop. The person kept eating my lunch. I would end up throwing away my remaining lunch because the thought of someone eating out of my containers grossed me out. I'd go hungry that day or eat from a vending machine. The company would not allow us to keep our lunch at our desk or eat at our desk. We had to keep our lunch in the break room and eat it there as well. This went on for a few weeks. I was pissed, so I decided to get even. I made lunch as usual, and for dessert I made a delicious chocolate mint mousse. This mousse was special though. I laced it with a chocolate laxative. As usual, half of my lunch was eaten, but the dessert was completely gone. The container looked like the bastard licked it to get every drop. I've never been so happy someone ate my lunch as I was that day. I sat back and waited. Around 2 hours later, I started to hear my stomach gurgling coming from the cubicle across from me. Then comes a loud fart. Up pops Jimmy the Weasel, who hurriedly walks his ass down the hall to the men's bathroom. The sound of his ass exploding could be heard by those whose cubicles were close to the bathroom. Jimmy was in there for a good 20 minutes. He comes back to his cubicle, his face sweaty and ashen. Finally, I know who has been eating my lunch all this time. This bastard was my supervisor, who was an arrogant narcissist. He made his team miserable with his power plays, put-downs, and manipulations. He would pit colleagues against each other. Around 5 minutes have passed and I am on cloud 9, silently enjoying my revenge. Jimmy can't ask me about my lunch as this would give it away that he has been the asshole eating it. It is super quiet in the office when Jimmy lets out a loud shart. He was wearing light tan khaki pants that day. He jumps up, grabs his car keys, and races to the bathroom. All of us can see that he had crap on his pants. It was glorious. After another round of loud explosive diarrhea, Jimmy leaves the bathroom, goes to his car, and leaves work early that day. After he left, the entire department broke out in laughter. We all hated Jimmy. When Jimmy came back to work a few days later, I saw him in the break room. I was eating my not-laced chocolate mousse. Jimmy's face turned green. Story 2. People who tie their whole identity to a team or even a political party. Simplicity and a sense of belonging. You get to be a part of a community while simultaneously being given a straightforward, oversimplified moral and principled doctrine. No critical thinking is required. I mean, I personally enjoy the tribal aspect of sports. Gives me a healthy outlet for that part of myself, but it's not my whole identity. If my team had a bad game, it might suck a little bit, but it doesn't ruin the whole day or anything. Some people get way too into it. My aunt is this way with politics. Everything about her life has become that since her son came out. She doesn't post anything on Instagram or Facebook about her private life anymore. Everything has to do with politics or the LGBTQ. If you disagree about one situation or story on any of the topics, she says you're sexist or homophobic. I can't believe that she let it consume her life the way that it has. I have a lot of pretty strong opinions about media, and I can be pretty brutal about what movies, games, or books I like or don't like. But this is exactly why I have a rule. If I get into a conversation about something I have strong opinions about, good or bad, I always start it off with something like, everything comes down to preference. And don't mind my opinion, just enjoy what you like. It saves a lot of time if you just agree that your opinions might not align at the start of a conversation, especially if it's about the Hobbit movies. I have more respect for people who go all out supporting their local sports team than someone who does that with a political party. At least with sports, it's all meaningless fun. A political party is just a tool to shape public policy, but some people treat it like their tribe or something. It's so frustrating. Story 3. People who hurt animals. I'm vegetarian, and while I know I'm expecting downvotes for this, I'm gonna say it anyway. So many people claim to love animals and still contribute to their downfall. They taste so good. I could never. So friend, let me tell you the people who really don't give a crap about animals. It's why I stopped protesting years ago. No one cares. Hope everyone who is paying for the torture and eats their bodies is included in that statement. You are about to get downvoted to hell, but I agree with you even as a meat eater. It's just a difficult thing to grasp and make an entire life change with so much of the world revolving around meat consumption. I have cut back to about 25% of the meat I used to eat, and factory farming is a nightmare. I love so many meat alternatives, but budget plays a role. If I can't get proper protein for a decent price, it makes it much harder to cut from the diet. Unless you're a strength athlete, you really don't need to worry about how much protein you're eating. I'm a high-level marathon runner. I've been vegetarian for about a year, and when I made the change, I mostly just swapped the meat for veggies or more carbs. And if anything, it's improved my athletic performance. Story 4. People who abandon their dog at the side of the road when they're tired of it or want to go on vacation without it. My husband works outside a park, and one day he found an old dog abandoned there on Christmas. The dog could barely walk, so someone intentionally dumped him there. We took him in and spoiled the poop out of him, and he died 7 months later. He was so sweet and well trained. I tried really hard to find the owner, not to return it to them, but to try to make sense of it. Our dog was abandoned by her old owners. They were backyard breeders, got evicted. My cousin's husband owned the house, and they left 2 of the dogs. They didn't tell anyone they left the dogs there, so they fully intended to let my cousin find dead animals. They were left out in these tiny cages in the insane heat of South Texas for nearly 2 weeks. The only reason they were still alive was a day laborer heard them whining one day and gave them scraps from his lunch. He was afraid to report it or even approach the neighbors because he was undocumented. So he just gave them each a little bit of his food, which wasn't much as he was barely able to feed himself, and filled their water dishes when he could. When my cousin told me what they went through, and how the older one was a female and she'd clearly had several litters and needed so much care, I couldn't let her go to a shelter. Not after going through all of that. The first 5 days I had to carry her outside to do her business because she was afraid I was going to dump her. I had to arrange for a friend to drive her when we went on vacation because we had already booked the plane tickets before we got her. But we made it work, and we got a rental car for the trip back, which was more expensive but worth it for her. She is now the most spoiled creature on the planet, and I hope she's happy because she's been a joy. I hate that she was treated so poorly, but she's my best friend right now and I adore her. My father once forced me to take a cat to a shelter so it could be put down. I loved this cat and I initially refused, so he grabbed a hammer. He said he would smack the cat in the head with the hammer and throw it away. I did the only thing I could, which was to drive about 20 minutes from the house and put the cat out. I couldn't keep it, but I hoped that someone would find her. It was one of the hardest things I had to do. I used to live in a country where people did this often. I was driving behind someone one night with my lights off, not intentionally. I forgot to turn my lights back on when I reached the country where the streetlights were not available. It also wasn't dark enough to warrant a headlight, and my destination wasn't too far from where I was. The person must not have seen me behind them or just didn't care. I don't know, I saw them stop directly in front of me and let out a dark lab puppy. I screeched, stopped my car, and ran out of the car to try and grab the person's license plate. He sped off, and I was unfortunately unable to gather the person's license plate. The poor puppy was just walking around aimlessly crying. It couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. I had a friend who didn't live far away from the vet school, and I called her up, freaking out. "Oh my god, this guy that I was just behind just dropped off this baby puppy." She came running to where I was and grabbed the baby puppy. She later told me that if I had not called her or had not seen the guy drop off the puppy may have very well died out in the temperatures and the environment. She kept the puppy as her own and named him Sobre, short for sobreviviente, survivor in Spanish. I've had a combination of rescues in pure breeds, not recommended, over the last 25 years or so. Each of the rescues has had a fairly harrowing tale, pun not intended. But our current one, I feel, is the saddest story. A friend of ours who is a specialist vet nurse rang us to tell us that there was a puppy available to us, but there were special conditions. At that point in time, the vet felt that the dog had some serious hip and knee issues that would require extensive surgery in the long run. The previous owners took one look at the quote for the future costs and demanded that the dog be put down. The vet was basically, "No way, screw you," and immediately removed the dog from them. We took her in, the dog, not the vet, on the condition that we pay for the surgery, something we readily agreed after meeting her. We were already angry at the previous owners then, but we were to learn a lot more about the abuse that she received in that home over time. We're still not at the bit that has made me angrier. When it came time to have the pup assessed for the surgery, 11 months later, we were informed that she had actually grown out of the problems, so no surgery was required. This is the part that has made me so mad. This little dog, a Chihuahua X, is one of the best companions I've ever had. Her name is Judy, named after a dog that my pop had in the 70s, who he had named after his sister-in-law. That great aunt of mine was actually a legend. I don't know why he didn't like her, and I can't stand the thought of her not being in my life, let alone her having been put down as a puppy. Screw that previous owner with a rusty stick. Story 5. Child abusers. As an abused child who broke the cycle, I have a really hard time looking at a tiny person in distress and thinking that beating that child will make me feel better. I will never understand how my parents could make that choice. Yup, I got abused, neglected, and kicked out at 13. My own kid is coming up to 12 soon, and it still boggles my mind that my mom could ever treat any kid as bad as she treated me, let alone assume that they would be fine on the street. I know the bar was super low, but I'm still throwing a mini party 2 weeks after their 13th about when I got kicked out, to celebrate not being a crap parent and still having a kid that loves me. I watch a lot of true crime content, and the degree to which some people straight up torture their children is absolutely incomprehensible. I cannot understand it. Even if you don't love them, how can a person do such awful things and just go on with their day? It blows my mind how accepted it was a couple of decades ago as growing up. It blows my mind even more how easy it is to not strike a child. Hopefully anyone still around who thinks that's acceptable meets the lonely, unsupported, and painful end they deserve. I just had to call CPS on some new friends I made recently. The thing is, they genuinely didn't think any of the crap that they were doing was abuse. I tried so hard to get through to them and make them change their behavior, but I don't think anything short of legal intervention is going to make them change. I'm not even the first person to call CPS on them. They sat at my dinner table and complained about their terrible neighbors who called CPS on them, but they didn't deny any of the things the neighbors called about. They just insisted that they had the right to do those things, and that none of those things were abuse. No kid deserves to be abused for any reason, but what really breaks my heart is that they're abusing their kid for crap he can't even control because he's autistic. Story 6. People who are mean to service or retail workers for no reason. As a retail worker, I am consistently shocked at how nasty and confrontational people are over the most trivial stuff, or they take their terrible days out on me. It's like they forget I'm a person too. It has honestly gotten so much worse. I was hoping COVID would unify the world against corporate greed and crappiness, but honestly, everyone seems to have become more self-indulgent and clenching their pearls. Yes, I know that bottle of water costs $5. This isn't Target, this is a restaurant. Hard to agree. It's wild how hot-headed and downright nasty people can treat service or retail workers like it's natural. Definitely one of the hardest unskilled work environments you can work under that can break down your spirit. These types of people aren't even people in my opinion, they're just something that looks human. I'm so aware of service workers and how hard their job dealing with assholes must be. I will just tell them, I'm so sorry I'm in a really bad mood, can you just ignore me for a little bit? They usually smile and say, yeah, not a problem. I get a guy into our restaurant every so often who acts like a complete idiot, dropping names like Gordon Ramsay, Marco Pierre White, or Heston Blumenthal. He always asks for something ludicrous and then drops the, do you know who I am? Who do I know? line. I don't give a crap. You're slurring and almost fell out of your table. You can't have another bottle of wine. The minute you make some meaningless concession, like another round of free bread, he's your best friend. Oh, I had such a wonderful night. Bless you, sir. Some people just get a kick out of being complete assholes until they get something. Then they've won. I work in retail, and a few customers have gotten upset with me for just asking if they needed help. Recently, a woman seemed to be looking for a screen protector. Our phone accessories aisle is usually a mess, so most people need assistance. When I asked if she needed help, she snapped, "It's right in front of me, I can see it," and gave me a disgusted look as if I had purposefully disrespected her. I have no idea why she reacted that way. All I did was ask to make sure everything was all right. Story 7. Abusive people who take joy in making other people miserable. Or abusive people who keep saying they're super sorry and act all lovey-dovey with you, but the next minute they're telling you that it was your fault that they hit you, and remind you that you can't afford the rent alone. Everyday sadists. I learned the term in college. They actually get off on hurting people, and they tend to have jobs where they can negatively impact people on the regular, like teachers or doctors. It's sick stuff. I worked at a school a number of years ago, and there was a teacher there who seemed to like being rude to me. I never said a word to her, but I was in the break room with everyone, and I was asking another coworker if there were plastic forks or something anywhere, and I turned and saw her just staring at me. I thought she was trying to get my attention, but no, just stared, and I felt uncomfortable, so I left the break room. Anytime I walked by her, she acted like I wasn't there. She would talk to people next to me, but never acknowledged me. She warmly welcomed other new staff in front of me and made a big show of coming off as a pick-me. I didn't last long at that job, it sucked anyway. However, I was lucky enough to lock eyes with her at a restaurant where I was working part-time, and she held her stare and smirked at me, like I was a failure for being there. I gave her a dirty look, but I knew it didn't matter to her like that. I was always told I was being insecure and imagining things, and am I sure that she's really being this way? I just never understood what I did. My best friend just got out of an abusive relationship. At first, I didn't see the signs that he was abusive. She never ever indicated that he was abusive either, until closer to the end of their relationship. After they broke up, I wasn't aware that she left him due to him being abusive. They were on and off again. So I really just thought that she had left him again and was coming back. She finally unloaded all the crap that he had put her through. I messaged him that night and told him that I didn't appreciate what I had heard, and I thought it was bullcrap that he tried to act like he was the innocent party through everything, after I finally realized just the reason why they were an on and off again couple. He told me that I should have fun trying to nurture back to health that vile bitch child. I have genuinely never wanted to punch a person through a phone so much in all of my life as I did that person at that very moment. I had no words to describe how angry I was with the entire situation. I didn't even say anything, I just blocked him after I told him he was never allowed on my property again. Didn't even wait for a response before I blocked his ass. What a waste of oxygen. Ugh, people like that are disgusting. Especially the abusive people who are so good at hiding the fact that they're abusive to the point that it is almost believable. Thankfully, I always felt there was something so majorly off about that guy that I wasn't terribly shocked when she told me what had happened in their relationship. He's the manipulative, abusive type that I only hope one day gets caught and sent to jail for his actions. Story 8. People who even after you prove them wrong with facts still keep on arguing trying to prove that they're right. Arrogant ass people. There are a couple of terms that somewhat explain this. There is the backfire principle and the belief perseverance. Essentially, the more facts that contradict someone's beliefs, the more they will resist and feel attacked. Yeah, well, just because all the science says the Earth is round doesn't mean it is. Science is biased. All the scientists are in the pocket of the globe-making companies. We did our own experiments and they only showed it was round because we used scientific instruments that are obviously biased. Personally, I like the saying, you can't reason someone out of something they did not reason themselves into. We all have beliefs not based on science and logic, but as you say, the important part is what we do when we are proven wrong. I had an argument with someone recently. I provided lots of evidence to prove the point. His response, you just need to be right, don't you? Well, I am right, you freaking idiot. Tell him when his beliefs are based on BS and I keep proving it to him, then it's about damn time to look at everything you have strong beliefs about, because when it's based on BS, then it's time to get new beliefs. Like, if you believe that your neighbor is murdering people but find out that he has a screaming goat and that's what you've been hearing, then quit being an asshole to your neighbor and quit calling the cops. I have a friend who is a doctor and he'll often use it as leverage in a conversation. Then he'll show me a study that is only slightly related to what we're talking about or that doesn't really support his argument. Then I'm the guy who won't listen to facts. Super annoying. Last time I just mentioned that I think what men and women consider domestic violence often differs, and I think that disconnect might be a factor driving domestic violence rates. In other words, in cases where domestic violence happens with a man violating a woman, it's possible the man doesn't think that what he did is domestic violence. He showed me a study for men and women to self-report whether they've been victims of domestic violence in the past month, 6 months, etc. The men reported like a quarter of the women's rates, and he said the self-reports approximately line up with how often these crimes occur. Therefore, there is no measurable difference in what men and women consider domestic violence. Never mind that they are both self-reported figures. Oh, and if I disagree, I'm an anti-science asshole because he totally proved it. Story 9. I will never understand people who are intentionally cruel or unkind to others. Whether it's bullying, manipulation, or just plain rudeness, I can't wrap my head around why someone would choose to hurt others. Empathy and kindness cost nothing, and I'll always be baffled by those who seem to lack them. I have everything in common with my brother, except cruelty. It's so freaking strange. He has beaten up 3 homeless people for no goddamn reason. Yes, he's funny, a great uncle, creative, hardworking, and successful, but physically, he is an abusive person. How? We have the same amazing parents, and the same childhood. It's just like, randomly he gets into fights with only people that are weaker than him. He doesn't drink, so drugs were never abused or neglected. Just like going all BJJ ground and pound. He needs to be arrested at least once. It's actually quite easy to understand them. They're usually very angry, have a high opinion of themselves, and at the same time they're insecure and have very few achievements. They'll dodge responsibility for their failures by blaming them on something else. My great decision didn't work out because someone else did something wrong and that's why it went wrong. Importantly though, because they can't celebrate their own successes, the easiest way for them to feel good about themselves is by tearing others down. The kind of guy that will start bullying and trying to humiliate their friends as soon as a woman sits down at the table. That's them. Yeah, I just have this innate desire to treat people kindly because it's how I wish to be treated. I hate being hurt, so I avoid hurting others, many times to the detriment of my own well-being. Though I'm getting better about that as I age, you can prioritize your own needs without deliberately causing pain to others, and I don't understand how people who just don't care who they harm with no sense of shame or regret. Story 10. People who keep having kids when they can't look after the ones that they have. I knew of a kid whose parents couldn't take care of him, so they sent him to foster care. But then later finds out that the mother refuses to take him and the grandparents are tired of the kid's attitude. That he had to continually get passed around in the foster care system by people who wanted to make money for taking in the difficult ones, but getting tired of his BS. It's disheartening. I think of this whenever people complain about child-free people, talking about how crappy they are on social media. People need to see this to know that they have the choice to not have kids. I am willing to bet good money that more than half of the parents of the world only had kids because they thought they were supposed to, and just never questioned that they had other options. I'm a woman and was raised to think that nothing else mattered outside of having children. It was such a strange feeling to hit my 30s, childless, and be kind of okay with it. I was more upset with myself for being happy childless than I was at actually being childless, if that makes sense. I generally avoid commenting on such personal stuff, but I feel obligated on this one. I'm a 30-year-old guy and literally just had the same convo with a family member after they asked for the umpteenth time if we would have kids. My response was, I'm blissfully happy with my life and not at all bothered by not having kids, but the way everyone acts, I'm more bothered by the fact that I'm not bothered about having kids. The immediate response was, well, maybe that's because deep down you want kids. No, the way everyone acts towards people who don't want or don't think they want kids makes me feel like there's something wrong with me for not wanting them. My long-winded way of saying you're not alone. Story 11. People who can never admit they're wrong. I think, as someone who used to have this issue, that it is shame-based. If you're wrong, you feel shame, and if you feel shame, you feel like a bad person. Even though you feel that way, you don't want people to agree with it, because saying it out loud means having to reconcile with the fact that you're a bad person. Learning to admit when you're wrong also means accepting yourself, and people with low self-esteem will struggle with that. And it begins with the way we're treated as children when we make mistakes, combined with how our parents deal with their mistakes. At least that's my take on it from experience. I had a middle management type go into a planning meeting for one of the teams recently placed under me. Context. They had some outlier constraints they did their best with, but some upper management types didn't understand why their planning meetings didn't follow their expected patterns. He was somewhat unprofessional and micromanaging to the point where members of the team were getting upset with him and feeling bullied. I had to get more senior management to pull him out because he wasn't taking redirection from me. Later, there was a meeting with this a-hole, myself, and some senior management. All I wanted was to hear him say, I won't do that again, but he doubled down, claiming upper management had sent him to straighten them out. That sent me up the wall, so I told him he was not to have contact with any of my teams without coming through me, and threatened that if I even heard a whisper he was upsetting anyone, I would personally drag him to HR. He then tripled down. I'll do what I think is necessary. Even the senior manager's eye rolled at that. I learned later that upper management had already counseled him that he was out of line that day, and that the whole meeting was set up for him to make peace with me. But he just couldn't admit that he was out of line. He found another opportunity a few weeks later. Story 12. People reinforce the failings of society by saying, that's just the way it is. People who defend war are like this. There has always been war, and as long as there are humans, there will always be war. It is a recently smart attitude to take towards a species that has developed the capacity to annihilate the whole world. I hope or work for the emotional, intellectual, or political betterment of our species, when the simpler alternative is to continue living out the worst impulses of our primitive past and drag the planet into an ecological and ethical crisis. I may be one of the people you can't understand, and you may, not saying you are like this, but possibly be the type of person who I can't understand. I can't understand people who mix up the way things are with the way they want them to be. Especially, again, not saying this is you, if they have a misunderstanding of why things are a certain way or fail to account for nuance in a complex societal situation. It's mostly idealists. I'm too practical for idealists. I also prioritize my mental health over things I don't have much influence over. So, and this is purely hypothetical, if someone started evangelizing some social issue that I'm not willing to invest my energy in, or if I see it's causing you distress, I might say something like, well, that's just the way it is. Story 13. People who constantly ask for help, but every time you provide a solution, they tell you that they can't do it, and they'll always have whatever problem they have at the moment. It's usually because the solution involves them changing or taking action instead of someone giving them a handout, but I'll just never understand it. I sometimes catch myself doing the first part. The logic is that I'm asking for help to solve a problem I'm struggling with. Please don't assume I'm an idiot and haven't tried the basic solutions first. They didn't work. That's why I'm asking for help. So I want creative or obscure solutions, not stuff that's like, did you try to turn your computer off and on again? Is it plugged in? Did you check for updates? I know I shouldn't take it personally. I feel that they don't think I'm an idiot and didn't try the most basic steps first, but there's a part of my brain that interprets it that way. I have to actively fight that feeling of being insulted by the solutions people offer. I guess you could say it comes from a place of insecurity and feeling like my basic intelligence is being questioned. I get you talking in broader terms about life stuff in general, but I think that's the root cause of it, and when people aren't self-aware, it becomes a pattern. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.